99% of the DNA backlog has been cleared. That is according to Police Minister Bheki Cele. Now, this will allow cases to finally head to court. Over 20,000 gender-based related crimes have already been enrolled. Let's get some reaction to this by Not In My Name President Siyabulela Gentile. Siyabulela, always a pleasure speaking to you. A very good morning. Certainly, it's been a very big concern, especially among South Africans who have suffered, rape at the hands of the perpetrator, some kind of violence at the hands of the perpetrator, and the actual evidence is dependent on DNA. Now, with this clearing of the DNA backlog, are we hoping that at least some kind of justice will be instituted upon those victims?
Good morning, Faith. Good morning to Marina as well, and to the viewers at home. No, it is indeed good news. We welcome the clearing of the backlog. I mean, you'll remember, I think it was in October, the minister indicated that they've just cleared over 30% of the backlog. And, it's encouraging for us that in a space of it's been 3 months or so, they were able to go just over 90%. This is good news, especially because a lot of cases have been depending on DNA. So we are happy and excited and welcome the news. We cannot be a country that is always criticizing. We must give credit where it's due, and we need to give credit to the SAPS forensic team on this particular issue. We are happy that finally justice will be served. People, women and children especially, that have been awaiting outcomes of their cases because of the DNA issues will finally be resolved, and we are happy about that.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about this Criminal Law Amendment Act, or the Forensic Procedures, also known as what will be termed as the DNA Act, that is supposed to actually come into effect in March or so. You know, in terms of the implications, what it's supposed to do is actually keep those that are rape reoffenders off the streets. So as it were. But what's your take on it so far? And I know that we're fantastic when it comes to being able to draft policy and legislation. It's just that the policy and legislation must filter down to the implementation aspect of it, where we know this as a country we lag behind.
Yeah, 100% Faith. And I always say to people that the problem with South Africa is not legislation, it's the implementation thereof. So we wait to see if it will indeed bring any desired outcome. But as civil society, we will be pushing for the implementation, because it's really sad, Faith, the cases that we are dealing with on the ground. You'll hear a woman saying that I live with my perpetrator in the same street, like one of the cases we had in Amaskra. In the same street, I see this man who violated me every day. And if you check, most of the cases have been obviously because of repeat offenders. So we are really hoping that this time around the legislation will bring about proper implementation to ensure that perpetrators of gender-based violence, sexual violence, femicide will be taken off our street, especially those who have proven to be beyond the rehabilitation.
Yeah. More than anything else, I think it's also about the capacitating of law enforcement in order for them to be able to collect this evidence quite correctly. And I'm imagining that if we truly want the perpetrator to be behind bars, I think there needs to be some kind of education component that goes with, informing how to actually preserve evidence, right, and DNA of that perpetrator should anything happen to you. Because you would hear, and I know that you deal with it quite extensively on the ground, that sometimes when people have been raped, the first thing that they want to do is take a bath or take a shower, and obviously take that evidence off them, instead of first things first being to the clinic, to the police station to get some kind of medical attention, to make sure that that DNA is taken off of your body, so that you're able then to have a strong case built against that said perpetrator. But it feels as though a lot of education is still needed, and not only from a citizenship perspective, but also from a law enforcement perspective.
Of course, and it's what we always emphasize as well in our workshops with other civil society groups, that as part of our response to gender-based violence and femicide is that we need to educate victims and potential victims that these are the steps that you need to take. In an unfortunate event that you had been raped or violated in any shape or form. We also need to pair that with the education, as you are rightfully saying, from the law enforcement agencies. There needs to be partnership between ourselves and the National Prosecuting Authority, the South African Police Services, everyone, every stakeholder. We need really to have a consolidated effort on these things. There is no point that government comes out and say no, information is readily available, but who's responsible for disseminating that information? And it's very unfortunate that most cases have been NPAs refused to prosecute because there hasn't been enough evidence, only because maybe someone has taken a shower or taken a bath after being violated, and there isn't much that the NPA can do at that stage. So we need to educate one another. We need to partner. You guys in media need to assist us as well as you've been doing in ensuring that information gets it gets out there.
Yeah. As I said, unfortunately, also we live in a country where gender-based violence and femicide just continues to persist. And at this point in time, what becomes even more dangerous, I think, Siyabulela, is how it is filtering down to even the younger generation. When we take, for example, the young lady that passed away in TUT, Ntokozo, and she was about, 21 years old, and at the hands of a perpetrator that was about 22, 23. These are kids. We're not talking about people that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, right? These are young people that are inflicting harm on each other, which means that that curse of violation and abuse is not only within the older generation, but is now filtering to young people in this country. I mean, at this point in time, how do you even make something like that stop?
Faith, we have toxic social scripts that are clearly being passed from one generation to the other. And this is why we always emphasize that our response to GBV must not only be limited to creating safe houses for battered women, to offering psychosocial services to abused women and children. That is well and good, but more than that, we need to have a proactive approach to this, which is that we need to invest in resocializing our boys and men better. And that is the only way, in my opinion, that we will end this thing forever. Unfortunately, violence is learned. Violence and hate and prejudice, those things are learned. So you have a young generation of violent men, a young generation of women who feel that they cannot do anything because things are as they are, because these things are learned and then they're inherited. So part of our response should include educating and resocializing of young boys. Faith, I always say that the scourge of gender-based violence is very frustrating in South Africa because you are busy dealing with old men, sending them to prison, trying to rehabilitate them, but then at the very same time, you have a new generation of abusers that is up and coming. So at some point, at one level or the other, this thing needs to stop. And how does it stop? It stops by having us dealing with the loopholes in our criminal justice system, resocializing boys and men better, finding support measures and services for women. So it's going to take a multi-layered approach to end it all. It's not one-facet. It's not going to take one action, and it's definitely not, going to take one stakeholder doing it alone.
I definitely hear you on that one. We'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much for your time, as always. Not in my name, President Siyabulela Gentile, just speaking to us a little bit about now the clearing of this DNA backlog comes. Very welcomed, I think very due also, especially when it comes to being able to instill and to get some kind of justice for those that have been victims of gender-based violence and femicide in this country. But